There's a force in the world that commands more than just respect, it demands reverence, introspection, and a quiet kind of fear. It's perseverance, the relentless, burning quality that allows some to push forward when others crumble. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to carry an invisible armor, pushing through storm after storm, while others falter at the first sign of resistance? This story isn't about luck or natural talent. It is about a discipline so ancient and formidable that it has shaped warriors, athletes, and legends alike. Perseverance has roots deep in history, forged in the fires of battle, sweat, and relentless training. The samurai of Japan, the Spartans of ancient Greece, and the Shaolin monks of China, each culture developed unique mental and physical practices to cultivate a resilience that was not just physical strength, but an unshakable spirit. These were warriors who understood that the body's limits could be pushed, but the mind's limits were the true battleground. They mastered not only their weapons but themselves. Our story begins with Maya, a young athlete whose life had been a cycle of hope and failure. Every time she set out to conquer a new challenge, she found herself succumbing to doubt, fatigue, or distraction. Despite her talent, she lacked the inner fire to endure beyond the initial burst of effort. Maya's journey is not unique. Many who have the skill fall short because they don't understand perseverance as the art of endurance, not just willpower. From a young age, Maya had dreamed of greatness. She imagined herself standing on podiums, breaking records, and defying expectations. Her training was intense, but so was the frustration when progress stalled. She tried to push harder, to push longer, but the breakthroughs never came. Each failure chipped away at her confidence until she was left wondering if she was meant for this path at all. Then, one day, Maya stumbled upon a documentary about ancient warrior traditions. She watched in awe as the samurai performed their rituals, the Spartans endured brutal training with stoic silence, and Shaolin monks moved with a grace born of centuries of disciplined practice. There was something magnetic in their unwavering focus, a sense of purpose so clear it seemed to transcend human limits. What caught Maya's attention was not just the physical rigor but the mental framework behind it. These warriors didn't simply work out harder, they cultivated a mindset that saw perseverance as a sacred code, a commitment that demanded everything. Their endurance was not sporadic bursts of energy but a steady flame that burned through doubt and distraction alike. Inspired, Maya began researching these warrior techniques. She learned that each culture had developed rituals and codes that anchored their practitioners to purpose. The samurai lived by Bushido, a code that emphasized honor, endurance, and unwavering commitment. The Spartans trained from childhood in relentless drills designed to harden both body and mind. The Shaolin monks practiced meditation and martial arts intertwined, forging a balance that made their perseverance both physical and spiritual. Maya understood that her struggle was not just about physical endurance but about building a fortress of the mind. These warriors had cultivated resilience through ritualized discipline, daily acts repeated without fail, transforming their identities over time. It wasn't about motivation, which waxes and wanes, it was about creating a state of being that made perseverance automatic. She began to see that perseverance wasn't something that could be switched on in moments of crisis. It was cultivated through deliberate practice, by embedding it into the very fabric of one's life. Maya realized she needed more than just effort, she needed a system, a code to live by. The first step was acceptance. Maya had to accept that failure was part of the process, that the path to endurance was steep and lonely at times. She watched how the samurai accepted pain and hardship as necessary parts of their journey. They did not seek comfort. They sought clarity through struggle. This acceptance was not resignation, it was an embrace of reality that allowed perseverance to grow. Next was commitment. Maya knew that casual effort wouldn't carry her through. The ancient warriors made irreversible commitments, often through symbolic acts or vows, to anchor their purpose. Maya didn't have a temple or a battle cry, but she could make a promise, to herself and to those around her, that she would pursue her training with unwavering dedication. She announced her commitment publicly, telling her friends and family about her new approach. This act of declaration was more than a statement, it was a ritual, a mark of transformation. It created social accountability and a psychological shift. Maya was no longer someone who tried and failed, she was someone who had declared herself a warrior of her own path. But declaring the commitment was only the beginning. Maya knew the real test lay in the daily grind, the repeated moments where fatigue, doubt, and distraction threatened to pull her away. The ancient warriors faced these moments too. They used ritualized discipline to create a framework where perseverance became non-negotiable. Maya started to build her own rituals. Every morning before dawn, she woke to a fixed routine, a series of physical exercises, meditation, and visualization. These acts were not about immediate results but about training her mind to endure. She learned that by anchoring her day in ritual, she reduced the mental resistance that often sabotaged her efforts. Her rituals were simple but deliberate. Like the samurai polishing their swords, Maya treated each repetition as an act of honor. The routine created a rhythm, a steady pulse that became the backbone of her perseverance. Over time, the effort required to start each day diminished, it became automatic, a part of her identity rather than a chore. As Maya continued, she noticed something profound. The rituals were reshaping her perception of struggle. What once felt like a barrier now became a proving ground. The fatigue and doubt no longer dictated her actions because the ritual had embedded a deeper resolve. She was no longer fighting against herself but moving with a current of purpose that carried her forward. This transformation was not instantaneous. There were days when Maya faltered, when the old doubts crept back in. But she had learned from the ancient warriors that perseverance is not about never falling, it's about rising every time. The rituals gave her a structure to return to, a sacred space where she could renew her commitment. Maya's journey into the world of ancient warrior perseverance had only just begun, but the foundations were laid. She had moved beyond fleeting motivation and casual effort. She was stepping into a lineage of resilience that stretched back centuries, a path walked by those who understood that true perseverance is a discipline of the mind, body, and spirit. In this first chapter of her transformation, Maya discovered that perseverance is not a trait reserved for the chosen few. It is a practice, a code, and a way of life that anyone willing to embrace its demands can cultivate. The question now is, how far is she willing to go, and what rituals will she build next to forge the unbreakable spirit within? This is the beginning of a story not just about endurance, but about becoming a warrior in the truest sense, a person who commands their own fate through relentless, disciplined perseverance. Maya's initial steps into the world of ancient warrior discipline had sparked a quiet fire within her, but it wasn't until she encountered the samurai code of Bushido that the true foundation of her transformation began to take shape. Bushido was not just a set of rules, it was a living philosophy that demanded more than effort, it demanded honor, endurance, and an unwavering commitment to one's purpose, no matter the cost. She learned that Bushido was forged in the crucible of battle and everyday life alike. It wasn't about reckless bravery or blind obedience, it was about a disciplined mind that accepted hardship without complaint, that viewed obstacles as tests of character rather than mere inconveniences. The samurai's perseverance was anchored in this code, a mental conditioning that made endurance a matter of identity rather than occasional resolve. What struck Maya most was how the samurai made their commitments irreversible. They didn't simply say, "I will train harder." They pledged their honor, often through solemn rituals or oaths, binding themselves to a path that left no room for retreat. This kind of commitment transformed perseverance from a fluctuating effort into a non-negotiable way of life. Inspired, Maya decided to adopt a similar principle. She realized that casual promises to herself had previously been too fragile, too easy to break in moments of weakness. To truly change, she needed to make a statement that was binding, both publicly and psychologically. One evening, surrounded by close friends and family, Maya declared her dedication to her training with a solemnness she had never expressed before. She spoke of her desire to embody perseverance not as a fleeting goal but as an unbreakable code she would live by. This public declaration was more than words, it was a ritualized act that sealed her commitment. The impact was immediate. Maya felt a shift inside, as if the weight of her words anchored her resolve. Her friends and family became witnesses to her transformation, creating a social contract that made backing down far more difficult. She was no longer acting alone, she was accountable to a community that expected her to uphold her honor. But the real change came in how Maya began to view her daily practice. She approached each training session as a fulfillment of her Bushido-inspired vow. It wasn't just exercise, it was an act of loyalty to herself and to the code she had embraced. This perspective altered everything. Fatigue and distraction became mere challenges to overcome rather than reasons to quit. Maya also discovered that mental conditioning was more than sheer willpower. The samurai used ritualized discipline, fixed routines performed with precision and reverence, to embed their commitment deep into their psyche. These rituals minimized doubts and decisions, creating a mental environment where perseverance was automatic. Taking a page from this, Maya structured her days with purposeful rituals. Each morning began with a precise sequence, a series of stretches, a visualization of her goals, and a moment of silent affirmation. These acts were not random, they were deliberate anchors that connected her to her commitment before the day's distractions could erode her focus. She found that these rituals served as psychological armor. When the urge to skip training arose, the memory of her public vow and the ritual's habitual power quelled the resistance. The decision to continue became less about fighting temptation and more about honoring a promise that had become integral to her identity. Maya's training space transformed as well. She created an environment free of distractions, a small sanctuary where each object had meaning, a worn mat symbolizing persistence, a framed quote from the samurai code reminding her of honor, a small bell she rang to mark the start and end of her sessions. These tangible symbols reinforced her mental conditioning, much like the samurai's swords and armor were extensions of their resolve. In the weeks that followed, Maya's endurance grew not just physically but mentally. She noticed that challenges that once seemed insurmountable became opportunities to prove her commitment. The fatigue that would have previously triggered self-doubt now elicited a quiet determination. She was embodying the warrior's mindset more each day. However, the path was not without struggle. There were moments when Maya wrestled with her own limitations, the temptation to rest longer, the whisper of old excuses. But the Bushido-inspired code she had adopted served as a compass, constantly redirecting her back to her vows. She learned that perseverance was not about never feeling weakness, but about recognizing it and choosing to act regardless. Maya also began to understand the power of symbolic acts in reinforcing commitment. The samurai's rituals were often dramatic, a ceremonial cutting of hair, a formal oath in front of elders, that made their promises tangible and irreversible. While Maya's declaration was quieter, it carried the same weight for her. She even began small personal rituals, like marking a calendar with a red pen after each successful day of training, visually chronicling her unbroken chain of commitment. This chain became a powerful motivator. Breaking it was unthinkable. The simple act of seeing consecutive days marked in red created a momentum that transcended motivation. It was as if she was honoring not just a commitment to herself but to a lineage of perseverance stretching back through history. Maya's friends started to notice the change too. They remarked on her newfound steadiness, the way she no longer wavered in her training. Some found it unsettling, her resolve was intense, almost unyielding. But Maya understood that this intensity was the fruit of a profound transformation. She wasn't just trying harder, she was becoming someone who lived by a code. This transformation extended beyond training. The principles of Bushido began to influence how Maya approached challenges in other areas of her life, relationships, work, and personal growth. The endurance she cultivated was holistic, a shield and a sword for navigating the complexities of life. Maya's journey into the warrior's code revealed an essential truth: perseverance is not simply an act of will but a disciplined commitment that reshapes identity. The irreversible pledges, the ritualized routines, and the mental conditioning are not just traditions of the past but timeless tools for anyone seeking to master endurance. As Maya moved forward, she carried with her the spirit of the samurai, not as a relic of history but as a living force within herself. The Bushido code had given her a framework to transform fleeting effort into unwavering commitment, and with it, the power to endure beyond what she once thought possible. Her path was now clear. The next challenge was to confront the inner battles that would test this newfound resolve, to wrestle with doubt and distraction in a way that only ritualized discipline could overcome. But for now, Maya stood firm, anchored by a vow that had become her compass, a warrior in training, ready to face whatever came next with honor and endurance. Maya had embraced the warrior's code, declared her commitment publicly, and built rituals that anchored her perseverance. Yet, as any true path demands, the inner battle was far from over. What she had not fully anticipated was the relentless tug of doubt, fatigue, and distraction, the psychological warfare that ancient warriors knew all too well. It was one thing to pledge honor and endurance, it was another entirely to face the daily grind where the mind whispered excuses and the body begged for rest. In these moments, Maya found herself locked in internal conflict. The voice inside her head questioned every step: was this worth it? Could she really keep this pace? The comfort of giving up seduced her with promises of relief, while the weight of her vow anchored her to perseverance. This struggle mirrored the psychological battles fought by warriors throughout history, silent wars waged within the mind that often determined victory or defeat. To confront this, Maya turned again to the ancient wisdom she had begun to absorb. She learned that the samurai and Shaolin monks didn't rely solely on willpower, which is fleeting and vulnerable to exhaustion. Instead, they cultivated fixed daily rituals, non-negotiable acts that reduced the need for constant decision-making and mental resistance. These rituals acted like a shield, buffering the mind from distractions and doubt. Maya realized that the key was to remove the daily question of, should I or shouldn't I, from her practice. Every morning, instead of wrestling with her motivation, she followed a predetermined sequence that required no debate: wake, stretch, meditate, train. This sequence became a sacred routine, a rhythm that steadied her through the storm of inner conflict. At first, this ritual felt mechanical and forced. She had to fight her body's desire to linger in bed, to skip meditation, to postpone training. But with each repetition, the resistance lessened. The ritual began to carve a groove in her mind, making perseverance less about struggle and more about flow. One morning, as she sat in meditation, Maya noticed the familiar swirl of doubt rising like a storm. Instead of engaging it, she observed it without judgment, allowing the thoughts to pass like clouds drifting across the sky. This practice of controlled breathing and mindful awareness was a hallmark of Shaolin training, designed to build resilience by teaching the mind to remain steady amid chaos. Gradually, Maya's relationship with fatigue transformed. Where once exhaustion signaled surrender, it now became a signal to lean deeper into her practice. The rituals she performed were no longer chores but acts of self-mastery. They grounded her identity as someone who endures, not because she was always strong, but because she had trained herself to persist regardless of weakness. Maya also discovered the power of framing her struggle as a ritualized battle. Each training session was a deliberate engagement with her inner adversaries: doubt, distraction, and fatigue. By naming these foes and preparing to face them through ritual, she reclaimed control over the internal battlefield. This mental reframing shifted her from victim of circumstance to active warrior. Her physical drills, once purely about fitness, took on new meaning. Push-ups, sprints, and stretches became symbolic acts of defiance against surrender. The repetition was not mindless but purposeful, each movement a reaffirmation of her commitment. This ritualized discipline allowed Maya's perseverance to grow stronger with every cycle. The structure of her day reflected this new mindset. Maya allotted specific times for practice that became sacred hours, immune to negotiation or delay. This fixed schedule reduced the mental fatigue of decision-making and created a steady cadence that her body and mind adapted to. She learned that perseverance thrives not in chaos but in order. Yet, despite this progress, Maya was not immune to setbacks. There were days when her body ached, when the mind's whispers grew louder, and the world's distractions pressed harder. During these times, the rituals she had cultivated became her refuge. Even when motivation fled, the ritual provided a scaffold to lean on. On one particularly challenging evening, after a long day of work and mounting exhaustion, Maya felt the urge to skip her training. The familiar voice of doubt urged her to rest instead. But she remembered the samurai's acceptance of hardship as a necessary path to clarity. She rang the small bell she had placed in her training space, signaling the start of her ritual. The sound cut through her hesitation like a sword-slicing fog. She moved through her sequence with deliberate focus. Each breath, each movement, each moment was an act of honoring her vow. By the time she finished, exhaustion was still present, but it no longer held dominion over her. She had reclaimed control through ritualized discipline. Maya's friends began to notice this shift. Where once she was prone to wavering, she now demonstrated a steadiness that was almost uncanny. She no longer debated whether to train, she simply did. This transformation was unsettling to some who knew her, but Maya understood it as the awakening of her inner warrior. The rituals also helped Maya manage external distractions. She created boundaries around her practice time, turning off her phone, closing doors, and signaling to others that this was a sacred hour. These acts were small but powerful, reinforcing the mental space needed to cultivate perseverance. Through this process, Maya's identity began to transform. She was no longer just an athlete trying to push through fatigue, she was a practitioner of ritualized discipline, someone whose perseverance was embedded in daily acts repeated without fail. This shift changed how she saw herself and how she approached challenges. Maya's internal battle was far from over, but she had learned valuable tools to navigate it. The rituals she built reduced mental friction, created psychological armor, and framed struggle as a sacred practice rather than a burden. This approach echoed the teachings of ancient warriors who understood that perseverance is forged not in moments of triumph but in the steady commitment to face the internal storms again and again. With each passing day, Maya moved closer to embodying the resilience she sought. The rituals were becoming second nature, the internal conflict less chaotic, and her identity more aligned with the unwavering commitment she had vowed to uphold. Her journey was a reminder that perseverance is not a single act of will but a continuous process of ritualized discipline. It is the practice of showing up, not just when inspired, but especially when the mind and body resist. Maya's transformation had entered a new phase, one where ritual, focus, and acceptance of struggle combined to build a lasting foundation for endurance. This was the awakening of Maya's inner warrior, a steady flame burning through doubt and fatigue, fueled by ritual and unwavering commitment. Maya's journey through ritualized discipline had brought her to a new understanding: perseverance was not a matter of scattered efforts but of singular, focused practice. She realized that the distractions pulling her in multiple directions were the true enemies of endurance. Just as the ancient warriors mastered one path with relentless repetition, Maya needed to embrace a philosophy of singular focus to build the resilience she sought. The samurai, Spartans, and Shaolin monks all shared a common truth: they achieved mastery not through variety, but through discipline honed by repetition. They did not dabble in countless skills, they committed fully to a set of practices that forged their bodies and minds into instruments of endurance. This repetition rewired their brains, embedding resilience so deeply it became instinctive. Maya understood that her previous attempts at juggling multiple routines and inconsistent practices had only diluted her perseverance. The fleeting bursts of enthusiasm for new exercises or meditation styles created indecision and fragmentation. To truly build her endurance, she needed to commit to one focused routine and repeat it daily without deviation. She chose a simple, yet powerful sequence: 20 push-ups, 10 minutes of meditation, and 10 minutes of reading. This routine was not designed for variety or immediate gratification but for building a steady foundation. The push-ups challenged her physically, the meditation trained her mind to remain calm and focused, and the reading nourished her spirit and intellect. At first, the repetition felt robotic, mechanical even. Friends teased her for the monotony, calling her robotic or obsessed. But Maya knew that this repetition was essential. The warrior traditions she admired echoed this truth: mastery emerges not from novelty but from the relentless practice of fundamentals. Scientific insights reinforced what the warriors had known intuitively. Neuroscience shows that repetitive, focused training rewires neural pathways, making behaviors automatic and resilience instinctive. Maya was not just practicing, she was reshaping her brain's architecture to favor endurance over surrender. By eliminating distractions and committing to this singular path, Maya removed the mental clutter that had previously sapped her energy. She no longer wasted willpower deciding what to do each day. The routine became a fixed pillar in her life, a daily ritual that required no negotiation or debate. This singular focus also simplified her mindset. Instead of fragmenting her attention across many goals, she concentrated fully on mastering her chosen routine. This clarity sharpened her perseverance, allowing her to push through physical fatigue and mental resistance with greater ease. Maya noticed a profound shift in her training sessions. The monotony that once threatened to bore her now became a source of strength. Each repetition was a building block, reinforcing her commitment and deepening her resilience. The routine was no longer a chore but a sacred practice, a daily act of forging an unbreakable spirit. This transformation extended beyond her physical practice. Maya found that her focused perseverance spilled over into other areas of life. Work challenges no longer overwhelmed her, and distractions that once derailed her progress lost their grip. The singular focus she cultivated became a lens through which she viewed all obstacles, as opportunities to demonstrate endurance rather than reasons to quit. However, Maya was mindful that this path demanded sacrifice. The variety and spontaneity she once enjoyed had to be set aside in service of consistency. This was a difficult lesson but one the ancient warriors had mastered long ago. They understood that the cost of mastery is the willingness to embrace repetition, even when it feels tedious or uninspiring. Maya's friends occasionally questioned her rigid routine, wondering if she was missing out on life's pleasures. But Maya knew that true perseverance required this kind of discipline, a willingness to forego momentary enjoyment for long-term transformation. She was building a resilience that would carry her through challenges far greater than boredom or monotony. As the weeks passed, the routine became ingrained. Maya's body adapted, growing stronger and more capable. Her mind grew steadier, less susceptible to the distractions that once pulled her away. The reading nourished her with new perspectives, reinforcing her commitment and deepening her understanding of perseverance. Maya also began to appreciate the power of ritual in sustaining this focus. The simple acts of preparing her training space, ringing her bell, and marking her calendar after each session became sacred gestures that reinforced her identity as a person who perseveres without fail. This ritualized repetition created a positive feedback loop. Each completed session strengthened her resolve, making it easier to maintain the routine the next day. The fear of breaking the chain became a powerful motivator, transforming perseverance from an effortful task into an instinctive habit. Maya's transformation was now visible not just to herself but to those around her. Her consistency was remarkable, her focus unshakable. Some found it unsettling, as if she had become a force of nature rather than a person. But Maya understood that this was the essence of the warrior's way, a person shaped by singular focus and relentless repetition, whose perseverance was no longer a choice but a defining characteristic. She had learned that the secret to endurance lies in repetition without deviation, in embracing a singular path with unwavering commitment. This was the discipline that allowed ancient warriors to face impossible odds and emerge victorious. It was the discipline Maya now embodied. Her journey was no longer about scattered efforts or fleeting motivation. It was about building a foundation so strong that perseverance became automatic, so ingrained that it no longer required conscious effort. This was the power of singular focus and ritualized repetition, a power that would carry her forward through any trial. With this newfound clarity, Maya was ready to face the unpredictable challenges that lay ahead. The next step would be to prepare for obstacles before they arrived, anticipating setbacks and creating responses that would keep her on path, no matter the circumstances. But for now, she stood firm, forged by repetition and singular focus, embodying the essence of endurance the ancient warriors had passed down through time. Maya's disciplined routine had forged her perseverance into a reliable force, but the true test of any warrior's endurance comes not in calm waters, but in the storms of unpredictability. Ancient warriors knew this well. Battlefields and life alike are riddled with surprises, obstacles, and setbacks. To endure, one must not only rely on strength and routine but also prepare for the unexpected with foresight and strategy. Maya understood that perseverance was not just about pushing through when conditions were perfect. It was about facing the chaos of life with a preparedness that allowed her to maintain her path even when circumstances threatened to pull her away. This insight was the next evolution in her journey, triumph through preparedness. She began by identifying potential obstacles before they appeared. Work deadlines that might run late, social invitations that could disrupt her schedule, days when fatigue would overwhelm her. Maya listed these challenges not as excuses but as predictable variables in the equation of her perseverance. Recognizing them in advance gave her the power to plan responses rather than react impulsively. This approach mirrored the strategies of the Spartans and samurai, who anticipated the unpredictability of battle. Their training included not only physical drills but mental rehearsals, visualizing scenarios and predeciding their actions. Such preparation reduced hesitation, enabling swift, unwavering responses when adversity struck. Maya adopted similar tactics. She created if-then plans. If she felt too tired after work, then she would do a lighter version of her routine rather than skip it entirely. If an unexpected social event conflicted with her training time, then she would reschedule her practice to an earlier or later slot. By pre-solving these scenarios, she eliminated the mental friction of decision-making during moments of stress or fatigue. This foresight transformed her perseverance from fragile to formidable. No longer was she dependent on willpower alone, which ebbs and flows. Instead, her responses became automatic, conditioned by preparation and habit. The mental energy saved by this strategy allowed her to focus fully on execution rather than debate. One evening, when exhaustion weighed heavily after a taxing day, Maya's first instinct was to abandon her routine. But the pre-planned response kicked in. She shifted to a modified, lighter practice, 10 push-ups instead of 20, 5 minutes of meditation instead of 10. This compromise wasn't a defeat but a strategic concession that maintained momentum. This flexibility was crucial. Ancient warriors understood that rigid inflexibility could lead to collapse. Endurance requires adaptability, a willingness to adjust tactics while preserving the core commitment. Maya's preparedness allowed her to embody this principle, keeping her practice alive even when conditions were less than ideal. Over time, Maya faced more unpredictable challenges, a sudden work trip, illness, emotional stress. Each time, her preparedness shielded her perseverance. She had rehearsed these battles in her mind and built contingencies in her routine. When confronted with real obstacles, she acted swiftly and decisively, maintaining her chain of practice. Her transformation was profound. Maya was no longer at the mercy of external circumstances or internal wavering. She had become a resilient individual whose steadfastness inspired those around her. Friends and family saw the calm determination in her eyes, a quiet power that radiated from consistent, prepared action. This evolution reflected the enduring legacy of the ancient warriors' art of perseverance. It was not simply about brute strength or unyielding will but about the wisdom to anticipate, prepare, and adapt. Maya embodied this wisdom, demonstrating that true endurance is a dance between discipline and flexibility. Her journey had brought her through rituals, mental battles, singular focus, and now, strategic preparedness. Each phase layered upon the last, creating a multidimensional fortress of perseverance. This fortress was strong enough to withstand the unpredictable storms of life, allowing Maya to move forward with steady confidence. Maya's story is a testament to the power of preparation in sustaining perseverance. By pre-solving challenges, she eliminated decision fatigue and created automatic responses that preserved her practice. This strategy transformed her commitment from fragile to unbreakable. In embodying the ancient warrior's approach, Maya had reshaped not only her habits but her very identity. She was no longer someone who tried to persevere, she was someone who persevered, calm, steady, and unshakable. This transformation inspired awe and even discomfort in others, but Maya understood that this was the price of mastery. Her perseverance was no longer a goal but a state of being. It was a force that commanded respect, not because it was flashy or loud, but because it was relentless and unwavering. Maya had stepped fully into the legacy of endurance passed down through centuries, a legacy that requires not just effort, but wisdom, preparation, and an unwavering heart. The path ahead would bring new challenges, but Maya was ready. Preparedness had given her the tools to face them with grace and strength. She was no longer the athlete plagued by doubt and inconsistency, she was a warrior of perseverance, forged by ritual, repetition, and strategic foresight. And so, Maya's journey continues, not as a quest for perseverance, but as a living embodiment of it, a beacon of steady determination in a world that often demands surrender.